It all started on a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the leaves crunch underfoot and the air carries a faint chill. Sarah and I had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood with our 7-year-old son, Max. It was a place where everyone knew each other, and kids played in the streets until the sun dipped below the horizon. We felt it was the perfect place to raise Max. One Saturday, while Sarah was at work, Max and I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was then we first saw the boy. He was standing alone at the edge of the park, near the line of tall, looming pine trees that bordered the playground. He looked about Max's age, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his young face. He wore a faded red hoodie and jeans that were too short for him, revealing skinny, pale ankles. Max, ever the social butterfly, waved enthusiastically and ran over to introduce himself. The boy just stood there, watching us approach, his expression unreadable. "Hi, I'm Max. What's your name?" Max asked cheerfully. The boy hesitated before answering. "I'm Sam," he said quietly, almost as if he was afraid of being heard. I smiled at him, trying to make him feel welcome. "Hi, Sam. I'm Max's dad. It's nice to meet you. Do you live around here?" Sam nodded slowly but didn't say anything more. An uneasy silence settled over us. I looked around, expecting to see an adult or a sibling, but there was no one else in sight. "Do you want to play with us?" Max asked, breaking the silence. Sam nodded again, and the two boys ran off toward the playground, leaving me standing there with a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. As they played, I sat on a nearby bench, watching them closely. Sam didn't speak much, but he seemed to follow Max's lead, mimicking his actions in an eerie, silent way. As the sun began to set, I called Max over. "It's time to head home, buddy." Max ran back, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Can Sam come over for dinner, Dad?" I looked at Sam, who was now standing at the edge of the playground, staring at us. "Why don't we ask his parents first?" I suggested. Sam's face fell and he shook his head. "They won't mind. I can come." I hesitated but eventually agreed, figuring it would be a good way to get to know our neighbors. The three of us walked back to our house, with Sam trailing a few steps behind. As we reached our front door, Sarah pulled into the driveway, returning from work. "Who's this?" she asked, smiling at Sam. "This is Sam. He lives around here and is joining us for dinner," I explained. Sarah's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Nice to meet you, Sam." Dinner was quiet. Sam barely touched his food and only spoke when spoken to. Afterward, he and Max went to play in Max's room, while Sarah and I cleaned up. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me since we met Sam. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, I heard Max talking in his room. Curious, I peeked in. He was alone, sitting on his bed, speaking in hushed tones. "Max, who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Max looked up, his eyes wide. "Sam, he's right here." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Max, there's no one here." Max frowned and pointed to the corner of his room. "He's right there, Dad. He says he has to go home now." I swallowed hard, trying to rationalize the situation. "Okay, buddy, it's late. Time for bed." Max nodded and climbed under the covers. I kissed him goodnight and closed the door, my mind racing. Sarah noticed my unease and asked what was wrong. I told her about Max's conversation and she looked as worried as I felt. The next day, I decided to ask around about Sam. I spoke to several neighbors, describing the boy we'd met. Most of them looked puzzled, but one elderly woman, Mrs. Thompson, seemed to know something. Her face paled when I mentioned Sam. "Sam, you must be mistaken. There hasn't been a boy named Sam in this neighborhood for years. He disappeared a long time ago." "They never found him," she said, her voice trembling. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Mrs. Thompson looked around nervously before leaning in and whispering, "Sam went missing about 10 years ago. He was playing near those pine trees at the park and just vanished. Some say they still see him from time to time, but it's just an old ghost story. You know how kids' imaginations can be." I returned home, my mind reeling. I told Sarah what Mrs. Thompson had said, and we agreed not to mention it to Max. That night, as I tucked Max into bed, he looked at me and asked, "Dad, can Sam come over again tomorrow?" I forced a smile. "We'll see, buddy. Get some sleep." As I closed his door, I couldn't help but glance back at the corner of his room. It was empty. but the feeling of being watched lingered. From that night on, Max never mentioned Sam again, and we never saw him at the park. But sometimes, late at night, I swear, I can hear faint whispers coming from Max's room. And every now and then, I catch a glimpse of a faded red hoodie out of the corner of my eye, always just disappearing around a corner or into the shadows. It seems that Sam has become a permanent part of our neighborhood, a reminder of a boy who vanished but never really left.